Hello and welcome back to GradCast Grad Life segment, where we're going to be diving into the world of finding career opportunities during a COVID-19 pandemic. I am joined by two of my guests, Teresa Boere and Heather Wakely from the Careers Education Unit in the Careers and Experience Department at Western. How are you both doing today?
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Gavin. Thanks for having us.
No, very excited to have you on, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So I think quickly for the audience, do you guys want to quickly both introduce yourselves and explain what is it you do at the Careers Education Unit?
Sure. So my name is Teresa Boere, and I'm a career educator. And so what that means is that I meet with students to help them with essentially what comes next after Western. So that could mean help looking for jobs. It could mean help with career exploration of what they would like to do when they leave Western. And sometimes it's even helping with grad school applications and professional school applications. So we do job search strategies, interview skills, all kinds of career exploration work. And we do this one-on-one with students as well as in groups. So we offer workshops on these topics as well.
Yes, and as you mentioned, I'm also a member of the Careers and Experience Department. In my current role, I provide leadership to two of the three units within the department. So the Career Education Unit, which Teresa is a member of, as well as the Experiential Learning Unit, where we support some of the different work integrated learning, community engaged learning, and co-curricular experiential learning opportunities for all students.
Oh, that's okay. That's very interesting. And it's good to know that these types of services and ways to get advice are available for graduate students here at Western. And I'm curious to know, like with all these, Teresa, you mentioned those workshops and getting to practice interview skills, and Heather, you probably getting to engage with graduate students starting your position. Have you noticed any major difficulties that students have brought up ever since we've moved into more of an online format?
Well, I think with respect to interviews, learning how to interview virtually is something new for students. And so part of our mock interview sessions that we offer traditionally would include information and feedback on the students' responses, but now we also include a little bit of information on how to make the most out of your Zoom Square or whatever technology is being used for the interview. So we talk about lighting and someone's background and where your camera is positioned and distractions, making sure your laptop's plugged in or whatever device you're using is plugged in, those kinds of things that we wouldn't have had to have a discussion on before.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to trying to do virtual interviews, they're in a way more nerve-wracking because there's a lot more things that could probably go wrong than if you were to go in person. Then you kind of have everything planned, but I feel like using on virtual platform, you worry about one, how you're going to perceive virtually, because sometimes it's hard for students to express some ideas through a computer than it would be in person, because you get more chances to explain yourself. And also the standard, you might just lose your connection halfway through your interview, which I guess is always very nerve-wracking because you don't know how you're going to be able to come back from that problem.
It's true. It's so true. But I think it's important to appreciate that there are good things that have come from virtual interviews as well. And so some people find it helpful to have little sticky notes around their camera for things that they want to use for talking points that, of course, you would never be able to do if you were in a face-to-face format. You can wear clothing that's comfortable, particularly below your camera level. If you're comfortable in your sweatpants and slippers, that works for you. That's great. And I think with respect to internet, we're all experiencing that problem right now. I remember when we were first began working from home when the pandemic began, and I used to apologize all the time for my internet connection being cut off and being frozen on my Zoom Square. Whenever I would come back, I'd say, I'm so sorry, and then I appreciate, what am I apologizing for? It's nothing I can control. I just had to kind of learn to roll with it a little bit. And so I think that people are forgiving with respect to internet connections. We know it's nothing that anybody has control over, and not something that you can plan for in advance, other than the fact that you close everything on your desktop and make sure that there's no other sources running. Your internet is your internet. It is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the thing, but it's always the things that we don't have control over is what we stress over the most because there's like we know there's nothing we can do, and that makes it even more anxious.
Mhm.
Uh, but I'm a little bit curious to know for when you started teaching students how to do interviews virtually, was there anything, and you mentioned advantages of doing virtual interviews over in-person interviews. So what are some of those advantages that you noticed?
Well, like I said about putting the sticky notes around your camera, potentially, which is useful. So just helping you remember your talking points and specific skills that you want to articulate well throughout the interview. Sometimes it's even the questions that you'd like to ask the recruiter at the end of the interview. There's always a section there that there's time for you to ask questions, and so it's always helpful to have several questions. So having notes on those is useful as well, and so that's definitely an advantage. Yeah.
I think some of the worries too in pre-COVID were about finding the interview location, arriving on time, and some of those concerns. So I think the elimination of, what if it rains? Do I have an umbrella ready? Do I know the address? Have I calculated correctly how long it's going to take to get there? I agree with Teresa's point that eliminating some of that has been balanced out with some of the new considerations for online interviews.
Yeah, I will admit that it does make it a little bit less stressful trying to prepare and get to the interview instead of worrying about the journey from your place to the said location. And when you do these practice mock interviews, out of curiosity, do you have to create different scenarios so the students can adapt to a real situation if they were being interviewed?
So you're referring to the questions that we ask?
Yeah, like the types of questions that you would ask them.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So we always ask students to provide us with a job posting and their application document that they used for the posting, so that we see their resume or their CV and or their cover letter if they included that. Because this is helpful with respect to the job posting, we can then see what skills and experiences the employer has asked for. And then we can target our questions to ensure they include some of those skills so that the candidate or the student gets practice articulating how they have the skills that match the job. So in addition to that, we'll ask general interview questions like, tell me about yourself, because it's very important students are able to articulate who they are to bring their documents to life. And it's a really common interview question anyway. It's a real icebreaker for employers to just let the candidate settle in by saying, tell me about yourself. But so many students struggle with that response. So we definitely practice that one. And then some other generic type of questions in terms of why did you apply for this position? We have a variety of types of questions that we ask. So often we ask behavioral questions where we're asking the student to pull from an experience in their past, whether that be through their academics or their work history or possibly volunteer work, or potentially if they've had experiential learning opportunity where they have maybe studied abroad, done a co-op, done an impact experience through Western, any of those experiences that they can pull from and then speak to that experience regarding a specific skill. So this skill could be collaboration or leadership or decision-making or time management, anything along those lines. So those are difficult questions to answer. So we intentionally ask those in our mock interviews so that students can practice them and rehearse giving a full and rich answer to the employer.
Yeah, I feel like with so many ways that students think about how the interview is going to go, that it's difficult for them to think clearly and to adapt to different questions that the interviewer may throw at them to try and understand why it is they're applying for the job, what experience do they really have, and how are they going to be able to express those experiences in the way that the interviewer / employer would probably understand. And I feel like with COVID-19, I think one of the problems is that we find it now harder to express some of our experiences because we feel like now that we're stuck at home majority of the time, that we're not up and about in labs, we're not up and about meeting people at networking events, conferences, that I wonder if students are starting to feel that they don't have as much of these experiences or skills to talk about during interviews as much as they probably realize. I don't know if that's maybe something you've come across or something you maybe get an impression of when when you're having one of these mock interviews?
Yeah, I think sometimes students have to reach a little farther back than just the current year, right? Because things are different. But I definitely also feel that students have learned a lot through the pandemic in terms of adapting to online learning. That's not easy. There's so many students who really had difficulty with that adjustment and are doing well with it, and are learning how to manage that and navigate that landscape that they would not have had that skill potentially prior to the pandemic. I think, even the use of virtual platforms, I mean, how many of us are now experts with Zoom, or very good with Zoom anyway, whereas a year ago, we didn't even know what it was. But it's not just Zoom, it's Microsoft Teams, it's Discord, it's Slack, all kinds of platforms for communicating with one another that maybe you didn't use before. And so I think if a student can articulate their the breadth of the platforms they can use in a remote world, there's definitely learning that's demonstrated there, and an employer might be impressed with that.
I would add, I think that your question, Gavin, also reminds us of the importance of research and preparation before the interview. So as looking at the company website, the job posting, recent news about the company, and how they're navigating the pandemic, to anticipate the skills and values that are going to matter to that organization, and to be able to think in advance about the examples that the student would want to pull from their background, the stories that they'd want to tell, whether that's, as Teresa shared, some of the examples of the past year, or perhaps looking back, and then practicing those stories, thinking about the ways that you want to make those connections to the type of candidate that they're seeking, and provide that proof. And I think sometimes in interviews we think it'll come to us, that we've been living it, and that it will just flow. We're talking about ourselves and it should just flow. But I think it can't be emphasized enough how important that research of the company and reminding ourselves of our own backgrounds and strengths is so important in advance of the interview.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Heather. I think researching as much as you can about the position, the company, or sometimes even the person specifically, if they're working on individual projects or events, can really give you a strong foothold in the interviews. And I feel like with a virtual platform, more students are being put in that position to do a lot more research to find that information, because we can now no longer bring sometimes like pages of documents about ourselves and what we have learned through our time at a different company or in school, or what we've been able to show. This is the research I've done of your company, and I think X and Y, and you show on paper, are very interesting, and this is why I think I'd be good for this position. And it's good that we actually touch a little bit on like these researching skills and trying to help students find a way to show their experiences and express themselves in a proper way and in a professional way. And Teresa, you mentioned these workshops where you help students write applications, strengthen CVs, find the best ways to reach out and find the opportunities that they're looking for. What would you say is probably the biggest change you've noticed ever since the pandemic started just over a year ago?
You mean for job searchers?
Yeah, I think I phrased that last part a little bit incorrectly. I really meant to like what new difficulties have you noticed for students trying to reach out to find these job opportunities? Because now we no longer have the chance to meet people in person, attend conferences or short workshops in person, which usually makes networking a little bit easier. But a virtual format does hinder some of it. But I was wondering if there's anything specifically you've noticed that's changed.
Well, I would definitely agree with the ability to network at personal events. It's just not there, just when you're standing at the water line or the coffee table, you just have chit chat with people, and that's how networking happens anywhere, right? And so all that is taken away. But I might suggest though that because we're doing everything virtually now with respect to work and networking and things, I find that students are telling me they're having better luck reaching out to people virtually and having, a 20-minute virtual conversation. So for the students who may not have attended conferences or had access to as many in-person networking opportunities, they're finding that this is working for them in particular, because they can reach out to someone and say, can I have 20 minutes for a coffee chat? I'll set it up through Zoom or whatever platform they choose to use. And they're having better success with people agreeing to that. And, maybe that's because people want to stay connected, and the person who's been who the request has been made of, they're thinking, I'd love an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody now. So it's a little bit of there are definitely negatives that have come out of it, but there are certainly positives as well. And I think that it's a matter of looking for opportunities and still continuing to try to network and attend conferences virtually. Virtual conferences are generally cheaper, right? They're less costly, and you don't have the travel costs of having to get to them. And so they could be more affordable for students to attend, and sometimes they're free because people want to stay connected to their networks. And so I think having access to those is very important.
Yeah, I think it gives some students who probably were in a more of a financial struggle to attend some of the conferences they wanted to, and now that they've moved to an online platform, it has opened the doors to a lot more people who probably didn't get the same opportunities as other students. So I think that is definitely one of the big benefits that has come from it. I mean, it's never the same experience as going in person, and as you said, meeting people in the water and coffee lines, but I think it's something that's pretty good considering based off the situation that we're in. And it's a little bit surprising to hear that you've had students tell you that, oh, actually, I've been able to meet more people because we're on a virtual platform than I would be in person. And I guess maybe part of that must be it's easy to send an email to someone specifically or a message to try and connect with them than to try and hunt them down in person at a conference. There could be thousands of people and you may never even run into them. And then you then end up sending an email anyway. So I feel like that must be part of the reason. And
and I think it's also it's more intentional networking, like I was at a conference, a virtual conference back at the end of January, and the organizers created these hallway conversations where you could arrange in advance to speak with someone in between the sessions. And so it's like you say, it's very intentional in that you're not hunting around for this person in a sea of how many participants that are there, how many hundreds that are there. So the conversations I was able to have were really beneficial because they were people I intentionally sought out, and we made time for each other. So it was really a good experience.
Yeah, and from that though, I was wondering, like, when you help these students try to find these opportunities when it comes to strengthening their applications and networking, is there any like main pieces of advice that you would give to students probably listening now who are maybe struggling to network with their particular field, or finding difficulties strengthening their CV or a resume for a job or an internship position?
Mm-hmm. So with respect to resumes, we have a service in our Careers and Experience office called Western's Employment Resource Center. So it's WERC, W-E-R-C for short. And this is a group of student leaders who provide their fellow students with support on resumes, cover letters, CVs, and LinkedIn profiles, as well as mock interviews. They help with interviewing skills as well. And so specifically for written documents, we have grad student hours. So every day of the week, students can drop into a Zoom link and have a private one-on-one conversation with a grad student who can give them feedback and insights on their application documents. And if students aren't interested or aren't available during those grad student hours, we also have an e-advising service where students can email their documents to WERC, that's W-E-R-C, @uwo.ca. And within 3 business days, they'll get a reply with feedback through email. So it's available to grad students as well, that service, as well as our drop-in hours. So that's with respect to the resume supports. With respect to my best advice for job searching, I would have to say networking is key, right? And so start with the people that you know. And lots of students will tell me, well, the people that I know don't work in the industry or don't do the jobs that I'm interested in doing. And so the theory is, it's not just about the people that you know, but it's the people they're connected to. So, you know, if you have done volunteer work, or if you have done an internship, or if you have worked somewhere and you know that your colleagues aren't doing the jobs that you want to do, but how do you know who their partners are, or their neighbors are, or their cousins are? And so you need to connect with the people that are already in your network, your current network, and let them know what you're looking for, what you're curious about, or what you're hoping to learn more about. And then ask them, do you know anybody who does that? And tap into their networks. And that's the easiest way to get started with networking.
I would add to that, I think it's like sometimes we think about networking as having a single goal, which is like identifying a job opportunity, hopefully connecting with someone that happens to have an opening and for it to be a match. But I think that networking is more than that. It's an opportunity to sort of prototype potential career paths and to gather information, to test assumptions that you have about a particular career or industry, to share your own experiences and information that you have. It's sort of a two-way thing. People forget that as well. So I think I think I encourage students to go into networking thinking about all of those possible outcomes and not sort of a single measure of success being that they identify a specific lead or job opening.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when it comes to networking, that you want to try and reach out to as many pieces as possible. I feel like when you try to limit yourself to one particular field, or there's only one person I want to reach to, the chances of you finding something to help your career in the future is going to be a lot slimmer, a lot less likely something might come out of it, unless they happen to have the opportunity of your dreams, which most of the time, unfortunately, doesn't usually happen. But it's like Teresa said, you meet someone, maybe they don't have anything for you, but they'll say, however, my colleague works at this location, is doing something very similar. I think you'd benefit talking with them. You should drop them an email, or I'll send an email for them and introduce you. And I feel like you should never also be shy when it comes to reaching out. It's a very intimidating process, especially now in a virtual platform, because they don't get to see you in person. You don't try to give off a good impression. You have to base it off whatever you write in an email, which can sometimes be very daunting because you don't know how you're going to come across. But I feel like you just need to sometimes just put yourself out there to the best of your ability. Or if you do know someone who knows them, it's a mutual connection, maybe you could ask them to introduce you, and that could probably relieve some of the tension at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely agree with all of that, Gavin. And I also think that it's important to be clear with what you're asking from the person you're trying to reach out to. So I know, for example, when people reach out to me for informational interviews or virtual coffee chats, it's very helpful when they say, they want, 20 minutes of my time within the next 2 weeks, because then I know what I'm agreeing to, or if I can fit it in. Where if someone just says, could we meet sometime to have a chat? I think, yes, but I'm not sure really what they're in my head. I'm thinking, I'm not really sure what they're asking of me. Do they want an hour of my time? Do they want it in the evening? Do they want a Saturday? When do they want from me? So just be specific as to what you're asking, because that way the person can then determine if they can help you or not, right? So I think that it's important to reach out, but it's also important to be clear with what you're asking for.
I think a great place to start can be identifying or looking for Western alumni that are working in your target organization or industry as well. That can be a connection that you can establish right away, and that can be a great place to start for people who are nervous about networking or wanting to set up an informational interview for the first time. Obviously, as Western students, we benefit from having a massive alumni network to connect with.
Yeah, I feel like with that, LinkedIn is a huge advantage, because you are able to, as long as they're registered on LinkedIn, you can find out if they've been to Western and graduated, then you've found someone in the field that you have something already in common, and you could probably use that to make the connection with them, that you may be in a similar situation that they were once in years ago when they were about to graduate. But I feel like this question just came to my head, though. Maybe for some students who probably don't use LinkedIn or aren't comfortable using LinkedIn, would you recommend maybe one of the best ways to network to try and find opportunities is to use profiles and bios of people they want to speak to online, that it'll probably just come down to general researching, as you mentioned before, Heather, and sending out emails when you think you found someone that you might want to speak with.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, you can certainly research and identify people outside of LinkedIn, but I would definitely encourage students to consider LinkedIn. It's so well used at this point. There's so much information available there, and research to be done on individuals and companies and job postings through LinkedIn. And I also think it's a great way for students to establish their own online presence, so that when an employer, we know that they're Googling and researching candidates. So it's a great way to intentionally create that positive professional presence that for yourself that you want to have online. And versus other platforms, LinkedIn also, I find personally, it doesn't require a lot of energy or input. You know, you can get a strong profile up and check it when you can. You know, use LinkedIn when you can, but it doesn't require the level of engagement that some other social media platforms do. So I think there are a lot of merits to LinkedIn, and we offer a great LinkedIn workshop. There's recording online for students that haven't yet explored LinkedIn but may want to. To your original question, though, it's certainly not the only way, but I'd encourage students to give it consideration.
Yeah, and you mentioned that LinkedIn workshop. Where could students find it? Is it just on the Career Education Unit website?
Yes, so if you go to career.uwo.ca, in the student section, you'll see there's events and workshops with the upcoming dates. We offer them often, as well as recordings of previous sessions.
Okay, well, that'll be very, very beneficial. And for someone who started using LinkedIn a lot more 2 years ago, I can tell you that it does help you a lot when it comes to networking. It's very intimidating at first, but eventually you get used to it and get more comfortable reaching out to people you've probably never met before. And oh no, go ahead, Teresa.
Sorry, I was going to say it's also a great tool for career exploration. You know, if students aren't entirely sure where they see themselves in the world of work, they can search alumni from their program and look at profiles and see job titles other graduates have had or currently have, or companies they've worked for. And then they can put those into a Google search and do some more research and looking into those opportunities. Then they can reach out to the person, of course, as well, and ask for an informational interview. And they can say questions like, what do you do every day on this job? Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. What challenges are you working on? What projects are you working on? How did you get your job? You know, all those kinds of things. But it doesn't even have to start there. You can just start with just looking at people's profiles to see what they've done and what they're doing. And if there's anything there that you're curious to learn more about, then that's the start, right?
Yeah, no, I think that is a very good start for a lot of people to take when they get into LinkedIn and to get into networking in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to quickly thank you both for coming onto the show. It was really great to get your perspectives and advice on how students can try to navigate the pandemic world and to make sure they can keep on practicing interview skills, networking, and knowing that there are services out there through Western University to help them improve resumes and their networking abilities. So I just wanted to thank you both for coming on. And I just quickly, if anyone wanted to reach out to either of you, where would probably be the best place to look?
Sorry, go ahead, Teresa.
Going to say email directly. You know, we're happy to connect with students wherever and whenever it works for them. So Boere, TBOERE @uwo.ca.
Yes, and again, the career education website has a ton of information for students. I'd also highlight Western Connect, connect.uwo.ca, and the job posting section. You know, we talked a lot about networking and that strategy, but I think it's also important for grad students to know that employers are hiring. We have as many job postings published so far this year as we had last year. So, you know, hiring is happening, and I think students should keep that in mind and be confident in their job search in that respect as well.
That's very good, very good. We'll make sure to include all of that in our show notes, and we hope everyone listening will take a look at the Career Education Unit website and check out Western Connect to find all of these services. This has been another segment of #GradLife, where we have been learning more about how students can navigate the pandemic world and to help improve our resume skills and networking abilities outside of grad school. I've been your host, Gavin Tolometti, and if you would like to learn more about GradCast, you can email us at gradcast@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at GradCastRadio. Thank you for listening, and see you all next time.